Arrakis. This desert world holds many mysteries when the story of Dune begins. Little is widely known about this planet. What is known, however, is that only here is the spice melange found. This powerful, mind-altering narcotic is at the center of all commerce and industry in the Empire. In this feudal interstellar society, in an era where any and all machine computing technology is banned, the spice has become an essential commodity in humanity's continued development. Mankind goes to great lengths to harvest this precious substance, as they must constantly contend with the dominant life form on the planet in pursuit of this treasure. On Arrakis, the giant sandworm reigns supreme. Inspired by epic tales of treasure-hoarding dragons, these behemoths are one of the most memorable and iconic elements of Frank Herbert's Duneverse. As large as a skyscraper and virtually indestructible, they are thought by the local Fremen population to be the physical manifestation of God. But to outsiders, they are nothing more than a deadly hindrance in their quest for spice. In this video, I'd like to take a deeper look at the lore surrounding these kings of the desert, and to uncover the mysteries surrounding them and their life cycle. Spoiler warning for those that aren't familiar with the books or the previous adaptations of Dune, as I'll be discussing points related to crucial plot details. The giant sandworm has quite a humble beginning. Its first stage of life is at the microscopic level as a sand plankton. When it matures to its larval form, it is small, flat, and leathery, resembling a leech. In this stage, it is called a sand trout, or sand swimmer. These exist in vast numbers on Arrakis. If squeezed, they excrete a sweet green syrup that is actually an extremely potent form of spice. Water is poisonous to the sandworms, so as sand trout, they pave the way for their next phase of life by helping to make the environment dry enough for them to thrive as they develop into their final form. Also referred to as water stealers, these small creatures seek out and encapsulate any sources of water and sequester it deep below the desert surface. When enough of the sand trout band together at these underground water pockets, the mixture of water along with their spice excretions form a liquid chemical that is fungisoid in nature. This is referred to as a pre-spice mass. This mass produces carbon dioxide that over time builds a considerable amount of pressure, to the point that it causes it to explode to the surface, killing millions of sand trout in the process. When this substance is exposed to the sun and open air, it then becomes a refined form of spice. The few sand trout that survive this process, called a spice blow, enter a hibernation state for 6 years and then re-emerge as sandworms measuring about 3 meters in length. Some of these worms, however, remain stunted, only growing to about 9 meters. These young stunted worms are used to create the powerful poison known as the Water of Life, which both the Bene Gesserit and Fremen people use in their rituals. This poison is the liquid exhalation that the creature produces in the moment of its death by drowning. After their metamorphosis into a sandworm, water becomes poisonous to them. The smaller young sandworms that manage to avoid their giant brothers and any deep water pockets scattered about, eventually, over many years, mature into what the Fremen refer to as makers, or Shai-Hulud, the fearsome and awe-inspiring sandworm of legend. With this process, we find that the life cycle of the sandworm is now complete, as the microscopic sand plankton feed on the traces of spice scattered about by the worms, and the sandworms themselves are constantly roaming through the desert sea, feeding on the sand plankton for nourishment. Their many rows of crystalline teeth serve the purpose of sifting through the coarse rock-filled sand, as well as for attack in the defense of their territory. One thing to keep in mind about these creatures is that they are solitary and fiercely territorial. Each sandworm patrols an area relative to its size, and they will ambush anything encroaching on those boundaries, whether it be another sandworm or a spice harvester. While they are certainly capable of eating humans, and whatever else they want for that matter, they only derive actual nutrition from the sand plankton. Humans are not a natural source of food for the sandworm because of their water content. Certain trace amounts can be tolerated, but a worm's main goal when it senses vibrations is to protect its territory. Though humans are not sought after as food, they are perceived as a threat. There is little chance of surviving a close encounter with these monsters, as their approach has been likened to that of a natural disaster. These details about the life cycle of a sandworm shed light on a few of the mysteries of Arrakis. Namely, why are there no open sources of water? And why, when sources of water are found, do they dry up so quickly? Pardo Kynes, father of Liet Kynes, learned that there was once open water on Arrakis when he stumbled upon a salt flat. And after studying the Sand Trout, he determined why this planet has become so inhospitable for human life. This is because it's not for humans. The sandworms are responsible for the ecosystem that now exists in this world. The Sand Trout have terraformed this planet into a desert for their own survival. This is their planet now. This idea was confirmed in Frank Herbert's Children of Dune, where Leto II looked far back into his genetic ancestral memories and learned that eons ago, the Sand Trout were introduced to this planet from some other place. As he notes, Arrakis was a wet planet then, and in an environment sufficiently dry, they could then move on to their sandworm phase. In the words of Liet Kynes, the highest function of ecology is understanding consequences. One of the themes explored in Frank Herbert's books is ecological control, especially when it comes to the precious substance of spice. This is a resource that, if exploited with impunity, could have major repercussions to the universe, which has become utterly dependent upon the substance. The spice is a byproduct of the sandworm's life cycle, so these beings are necessary. Yet on Arrakis, we see outsiders constantly contending with the environment to exploit it. Any attempt humans make at controlling their environment by using any sort of shielding technology is met with swift destruction from these creatures. This contention by outsiders stands in stark contrast to the local Fremen people who live with the planet, not against it. They revere the sandworm and have come to adapt every custom, every part of their lives to coexist with them and their environment. They've even achieved this to such an extent that they are able to ride the great sandworm as a youth's rite of passage. This incredible feat is achieved by attracting a sandworm with a device called a thumper, which produces rhythmic sounds and vibrations. The rider then uses long hooks, called maker hooks, to attach itself to the worm, and though the scales are impenetrable, they can be manipulated. With these special hooks, a Fremen can lift up a scale, and the worm instinctively rotates itself so the vulnerable scale is at the highest point from the desert sea, so as to avoid the intense irritation caused by the coarse sand. The sandworm also will not submerge when its scales are lifted. This certainly demonstrates the symbiotic relationship that is possible with these creatures, and yet even the Fremen seek to control the future of this ecosystem in which the sandworm resides, as they work to return the planet to its once lush state to make it more hospitable for humans. Power and control over the natural world, and exploitation versus adaptation are important themes throughout the Dune saga, and in this complex and unique world, it becomes clear that if the sandworms are done away with, so too goes the spice, thus revealing who ultimately controls the universe. Bless the Maker and his water. Bless the coming and going of him. May his passage cleanse the world. May he keep the world for his people. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy content. Thanks so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.